Most parents think teaching kids about money means opening a savings account and hoping for the best. They're wrong, and their grandchildren will pay for that mistake for decades. I spent 40 years as a clinical psychologist specializing in behavioral economics and family systems. I've watched 3 generations navigate money, and what I'm about to share contradicts everything you've heard at church socials or read in parenting magazines. The single biggest predictor of a child's financial success isn't their grades, their parents' income, or even their IQ. It's whether they learned before age 10 that money is a consequence, not a right. Here's what nobody tells you. Children's brains are wired to learn financial behavior between ages 5 and 12. After that, you're not teaching, you're correcting. And correction is 10 times harder than formation. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for value-based decision-making, develops its core pathways during these years. Miss this window, and you're fighting neural patterns that are already hardwired. I'm going to give you 7 lessons that will fundamentally alter how your grandchildren think about money. Not tips, not suggestions, lessons that, when applied correctly, create adults who control money instead of being controlled by it. But first, you need to understand why everything you were taught about allowances is sabotaging your family's financial future. The allowance system teaches children that money appears without effort. You exist, therefore you receive. This is the exact opposite of how the real world operates, and it creates what we call in behavioral psychology entitlement schema, a belief system where resources are expected rather than earned. A 2019 study from the University of Minnesota tracked 820 families over 15 years and found that children who received unconditional allowances were 34% more likely to carry credit card debt in their 20s and 28% less likely to save for retirement before age 30. The damage isn't just financial, it's neurological. When a child receives money without working for it, their brain releases dopamine without the preceding effort-reward cycle. This creates what neuroscientists call reward prediction error. The brain expects reward without input. Now multiply this pattern over 10 years of childhood. You've essentially trained a brain to expect something for nothing. Then we act surprised when our 25-year-old grandchild can't hold a job or save a dollar. Here's lesson 1, and it's going to upset some of you. Eliminate allowances completely. Replace them with commissions. Your grandchild doesn't get paid for breathing. They get paid for output. Feeding the dog, taking out trash, folding laundry, real work that contributes real value to the household. This isn't about being harsh, it's about being accurate. Money comes from value creation, period. When I suggest this to grandparents, I get pushback. But they're just children. Exactly. They're children whose brains are forming permanent patterns about how resources are acquired. A 2021 longitudinal study published in the Journal of Consumer Research followed 643 children from age 7 to age 26. Those who earned money through household contributions showed 43% higher workplace retention rates and 38% higher savings rates than those who received unconditional allowances. The brain that learns effort precedes reward in childhood automatically applies this pattern in adulthood. But here's where most grandparents make their second mistake. They pay too much. When you overpay for simple tasks, you distort the value-effort ratio. A child who receives $5 for making their bed learns that minimal effort produces maximum reward. Then they enter the workforce expecting $50 an hour for data entry. The market corrects them harshly, and they spend their 20s angry at a system that doesn't pay fairly, pay proportionally. A 7-year-old might earn a quarter for unloading the dishwasher. A 12-year-old might earn $2 for mowing a lawn section. The amount matters less than the ratio between effort and compensation. This teaches economic literacy at a cellular level. Their prefrontal cortex is literally building neural networks that calculate value exchange. You're not just teaching money, you're building brain architecture. I worked with a family where the grandfather paid his 8-year-old grandson $10 every time he cleaned his room. The child's room was spotless for 3 weeks. Then the grandfather went on vacation for 2 weeks. When he returned, the room was a disaster. The child had learned that cleaning only mattered when payment was involved. That's not cleanliness. That's transactional thinking applied inappropriately. The grandfather and I restructured the system. The child had basic responsibilities that were non-negotiable and unpaid: making his bed, putting dirty clothes in the hamper, basic hygiene. Then he had commission opportunities: extra cleaning, yard work, helping with projects. Within 2 months, the child understood the difference between basic life responsibilities and paid work. His room stayed clean whether grandpa was home or not, and he actively looked for commission opportunities. That's the difference between bribing and teaching. The commission system also prevents another massive problem: children who negotiate everything. When kids learn that everything is transactional, they start demanding payment for basic courtesy. I'll set the table if you give me $5. I'll do my homework if you buy me that game. You've created a little mercenary who calculates the monetary value of every action. That's not how functional adults operate. Functional adults understand that some things are basic expectations of living in a community, and other things generate income. Teaching this distinction early prevents entitled adults who can't function in workplaces that require collaboration and teamwork. Now, lesson 2 is where most financial education completely fails: the 3-jar system. Give, save, spend, not buckets, not apps. Physical jars they can see and touch. Why? Because children under 12 are concrete operational thinkers. They need tactile, visual representation of abstract concepts. Money on a screen is meaningless to a developing brain. Money in a jar they can hold, count, and watch grow creates spatial temporal memory associations that last a lifetime. Here's what the research shows. Children who use physical money containers show 56% better budget adherence in their 20s compared to those who only used digital tracking. This data comes from a 2020 Oxford study involving 1,200 participants. The physical act of dividing money into jars creates what psychologists call mental accounting. The brain literally categorizes resources into separate cognitive accounts. This prevents the "it's all one pot" thinking that leads to overspending. But here's the critical part most people miss. The jars must be transparent. Your grandchild needs to see their saving jar fill up. This creates a visual feedback loop that reinforces delayed gratification. Each time they pass that jar and see it fuller than yesterday, their brain releases a small amount of dopamine. They're training themselves to feel good about accumulation, not just expenditure. This is the opposite of consumer culture, which trains brains to feel good about spending. The ratios matter too. Most financial educators suggest equal thirds, 33% to each jar. I disagree based on developmental psychology. For children under 10, I recommend 10% give, 30% save, 60% spend. Why? Because at this age, they need immediate gratification frequently enough to maintain engagement. If they're saving 70% of their money, they'll lose interest in the system entirely. The goal at this stage isn't optimal financial behavior. It's building the neural habit of categorization. As they get older and their prefrontal cortex develops more impulse control, you adjust the ratios. By age 14, you might shift to 10% give, 50% save, 40% spend. By 16, 10% give, 60% save, 30% spend. You're gradually training the brain toward adult financial patterns. The give jar is equally important, and not for the reasons you think. Teaching generosity isn't about being nice. It's about preventing scarcity mindset. Children who regularly give money away learn that resources flow. The brain interprets giving as abundance. "I have enough to share" becomes a core belief. Contrast this with children who never give, whose brains encode "I must hold everything because there isn't enough." This scarcity programming creates adults who hoard, who panic about money, who make fear-based financial decisions. A fascinating 2018 study from Stanford tracked charitable giving patterns from childhood through age 40. Participants who gave away at least 10% of their childhood earnings showed 41% lower financial anxiety scores in adulthood, and were 33% more likely to invest in growth assets rather than keeping everything in savings accounts. Generosity training literally rewires the amygdala's threat response to money. But here's what most people get wrong about the giving jar. They let children give to whatever they want without guidance. A 7-year-old wants to give money to buy their friend candy. That's not generosity. That's social currency. True giving means contributing to something larger than yourself, something that helps people you'll never meet. Guide your grandchildren toward organizations that align with their values. If they love animals, find a shelter. If they care about hungry kids, find a food bank. If they're passionate about the environment, find a conservation group. Then make the giving tangible. Don't just transfer money online. Take them to the organization, let them hand over the cash, let them see where their money goes. This creates emotional connection to generosity, which cements it as a lifelong pattern. Let me tell you about my granddaughter Emma. At age 8, she saved her commission money for 11 weeks to buy a $40 toy. 2 days before she had enough, her younger cousin came to visit and mentioned wanting the same toy. Emma took money from her save jar and give jar, bought the toy, and gave it to her cousin. My daughter-in-law was horrified. "Emma, you worked so hard for that." Emma's response floored everyone. "I can earn more." She can't. That's not kindness. That's abundance mindset. Emma's brain had learned that money is renewable. that effort creates resources, and that giving doesn't equal loss. She's now 19, working part-time through college, has 6 months of expenses saved, and regularly contributes to causes she cares about. Her roommates are drowning in credit card debt and can't understand why Emma isn't stressed about money. The difference was programmed between ages 6 and 12. Lesson 3. Controlled failure. This is where grandparents completely lose their nerve, but it's the most important lesson of all. You must let your grandchildren make financial mistakes while the stakes are low. A 10-year-old who blows their entire spending jar on candy and regrets it learns more about impulse control than 1,000 lectures ever taught. But if you bail them out, if you replace that money, you've just taught them that mistakes have no consequences. The anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for error detection and emotional regulation, strengthens through mistake correction cycles. When a child makes a financial error, experiences the negative emotion, and then problem solves a solution, they're building executive function. But if you remove the negative emotion by fixing their mistake, their brain doesn't complete the learning cycle. You've interrupted neural development. I've seen grandparents who can't watch this process. Their grandchild overspends, has no money for something they want, and grandma sneaks them $20. Feels loving in the moment, catastrophic in the long term. That child's brain just learned, mistakes don't matter because someone will rescue me. Now multiply that over 8 years. Then act shocked when your 22-year-old grandchild has $12,000 in credit card debt and expects you to pay it off. A 2017 study from the University of Michigan's Center for Human Growth and Development followed 890 young adults who had experienced financial failure in childhood. Those whose parents let them experience the consequences showed 67% lower debt-to-income ratios by age 28. Those who were consistently bailed out showed the opposite: higher debt, lower credit scores, and significantly higher rates of financial dependence on family. The key is proportional stakes. A 7-year-old losing $5 hurts but doesn't destroy. A 17-year-old wrecking a car they bought hurts significantly more. Both teach invaluable lessons, but only if adults don't intercede. Your job isn't to prevent your grandchildren from experiencing pain. It's to ensure they experience it while they're still under your guidance, and the consequences are survivable. Write this down. Pain is information. When your grandchild makes a money mistake and feels regret, embarrassment, or disappointment, neurons are firing in specific patterns that encode "don't do this again." If you eliminate the pain, you eliminate the encoding. No pain, no learning. You're not being mean by allowing natural consequences. You're being scientifically accurate about how human brains acquire knowledge. Here's something most grandparents never consider. The mistakes your grandchildren make with $5 at age 9 are protecting them from $50,000 mistakes at age 29. I worked with a client whose parents paid off her credit cards 4 times before she turned 25. Each time they thought they were helping. Each time they reinforced the neural pathway that says debt has no real consequences. By 28, she had accumulated $97,000 in various debts, and her parents finally said no. She ended up in my office having panic attacks because, for the first time in her life, she had to face financial reality. Her parents' kindness had created a 28-year-old with the financial coping skills of a teenager. Compare that to my grandson Jacob. At age 11, he saved his commission money to buy an expensive remote control car. Within 3 days, he broke it doing stunts. He was devastated. He came to me crying, asking if I could buy him another one. I said no. I sat with him while he cried. I validated his feelings. I did not fix his problem. 2 weeks later, he had researched how to repair it, bought parts with money he earned doing extra work, and fixed it himself. That experience taught him more about value, research, problem solving, and resilience than any lecture could have. He's now 16 and runs a small repair business fixing electronics for neighbors. The broken toy at age 11 became the foundation for entrepreneurship at 16. But controlled failure requires something most grandparents struggle with: emotional regulation in themselves. When your grandchild is crying because they made a poor choice, every fiber of your being wants to fix it. Your mirror neurons are firing. You're experiencing their distress secondhand. This is where you must remember: short-term comfort creates long-term pain. Long-term benefit requires short-term discomfort. You're not being cruel. You're being committed to their future competence over their current comfort. Here's the framework I teach. Validate the emotion, refuse to fix the problem, guide the solution process. I can see you're really upset that you spent all your money and now you can't buy what you want. That's a terrible feeling. What do you think you could do differently next time? Not "here's $20." Not "I told you so." Validation plus guidance equals learning. Rescue equals dependency. Lesson 4 is about transparency, and this is where most families completely fail. Money is treated as a taboo subject, something adults discuss behind closed doors while children are excluded. This creates what developmental psychologists call financial mysticism, the belief that money operates by mysterious rules only adults understand. This ignorance breeds anxiety, and anxiety breeds terrible decisions. Include your grandchildren in age-appropriate financial discussions. When you're deciding between two purchases, explain your reasoning out loud. I could buy the cheaper toaster, but it'll probably break in a year. The expensive one costs twice as much but will last 10 years, so it's actually cheaper long-term. You've just taught present value calculation without using that term. When bills arrive, show them. Explain what electricity costs, what water costs, what the mortgage payment is, not to scare them, but to demystify adult finances. Children who understand household economics make radically different choices. They turn off lights because they've seen the electric bill. They take shorter showers because they understand water costs money. They're developing financial consciousness. But here's what most grandparents fear. Won't this stress them out? Sometimes, yes. And that's appropriate stress. The world costs money. Shelter costs money. Food costs money. Learning this at age 9 in the safety of a stable home is far better than learning it at age 22 when they sign their first lease and have a panic attack because nobody ever told them apartments cost more than just rent. A 2022 study from the Federal Reserve Bank examined financial literacy rates across 3 generations. Participants whose parents regularly discussed money with them scored 52% higher on financial literacy tests and showed 44% lower rates of predatory loan usage. The simple act of making money visible and discussable creates competent adults. I want to address something controversial here: inheritance discussions. Many financial advisors suggest never telling children about potential inheritances because it might make them lazy. This is psychologically backward. Uncertainty creates anxiety. Anxiety impairs decision-making. What does create problems is surprise wealth without preparation. If your grandchildren will inherit money, tell them. Then teach them how to steward it. If they won't inherit money, tell them that too. Let them plan accordingly. The brain handles known information far better than unknown possibilities. Secrets about money create either false security or financial paranoia, both of which lead to poor decisions. I had a client who inherited $800,000 at age 30. Nobody had ever told him this was coming. He had no financial education. Within 18 months, he had spent $600,000 on cars, vacations, and a business idea that failed. The remaining $200,000 sat in a checking account, losing value to inflation, because he was terrified to invest it after losing so much. If his parents had told him at age 15 that he would inherit money and then spent the next 15 years teaching him how to manage it, the outcome would have been completely different. Transparency also means admitting your own mistakes. When you make a poor financial decision, tell your grandchildren. Explain what you did wrong and what you learned. This normalizes error as part of the learning process and removes the shame that prevents people from correcting course. I once bought a timeshare. Terrible decision. I told my grandchildren the whole story, how the salespeople pressured me, how I got caught up in the moment, how much money it cost me to get out of it. That story taught them more about sales tactics, emotional decision-making, and sunk cost fallacy than any formal lesson could have. They still bring it up when they're considering major purchases. Is this a timeshare situation, Grandpa? Lesson 5 involves the concept of delayed gratification, but not how you think. Traditional advice says, teach kids to wait for what they want. True, but incomplete. You need to teach them to wait strategically for things that appreciate while spending immediately on things that provide disproportionate value. This is sophisticated economic thinking that most adults don't understand, which is exactly why you need to teach it young. Some purchases are worth waiting for because waiting makes them cheaper or better. A coat at the end of winter costs half as much. Waiting makes sense, but concert tickets to see your grandchild's favorite artist? Buy them now, because that experience is time-limited and emotionally valuable. The memory will compound in value for years. Teaching this distinction creates adults who can differentiate between purchases that appreciate and purchases that depreciate. Most people buy depreciating items immediately and appreciating items never. Your grandchildren need to learn the opposite pattern. Here's a practical exercise. Next time your grandchild wants something, ask them 3 questions. First, will this be worth more or less in a year? Second, will waiting to buy this make it better or worse? Third, how will you feel about this purchase in 6 months? These questions train evaluative thinking. They're learning to analyze purchases through multiple time frames simultaneously. That's executive function development in action. My granddaughter Sophie wanted a particular doll that cost $30. She had the money. I asked her the 3 questions. She determined the doll would be worth less in a year, waiting wouldn't improve it, and she'd probably still want it in 6 months. Green light, good purchase. 3 months later, she wanted a different toy that was trendy among her classmates. Same questions. She realized it would be worthless in a year, waiting wouldn't matter, and she probably wouldn't care about it in 6 months. She decided not to buy it. 2 months later, none of her classmates cared about that toy anymore. She felt proud of her decision. That's the evaluative framework building in real time. But delayed gratification has a dark side that nobody discusses. When taken too far, it creates adults who never enjoy their money. They save obsessively, denying themselves reasonable pleasures, and die with millions in the bank and a lifetime of missed experiences. That's not wisdom. That's pathology. Your grandchildren need to learn that money is a tool for building a good life, not an end in itself. This is where the spending jar becomes crucial. That money is for enjoyment, for learning what brings them happiness, for experiencing the pleasure of purchase. Don't shame spending from the spending jar. Celebrate it. You saved up for that and bought it. How does it feel? Was it worth the wait? You're teaching them to evaluate emotional return on investment. Some purchases bring joy, some bring regret. Both teach valuable lessons. Comment below. What's one thing you bought immediately that you still value years later? I want to hear your stories. Lesson 6 addresses something I rarely see discussed: financial identity. Who your grandchildren believe they are in relation to money shapes every decision they make. If they believe they're not good with money, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they believe money is for other people, they'll sabotage their own success. You shape this identity through language. Never say, "We can't afford that." Say instead, "We're choosing not to buy that because we're prioritizing something else." The first statement teaches powerlessness. The second teaches agency. Can't versus choose are radically different cognitive frameworks. Never say, "Money doesn't grow on trees." Say, "Money comes from creating value for others." One teaches scarcity. The other teaches abundance through contribution. These language patterns literally build different neural networks. Watch your own money language ruthlessly. Children absorb every casual comment about money. If you constantly say, "I'm broke," your grandchildren learn that being broke is normal. If you say, "Rich people are greedy," you've just taught them that becoming wealthy means becoming immoral. These unconscious beliefs sabotage financial success for entire lifetimes. A 2019 linguistic analysis study from Cornell examined the money language used in 450 households and tracked children's financial outcomes over 20 years. Households using agency-based language raised children with 61% higher average net worth by age 35 compared to households using scarcity-based language. Words matter more than we want to admit. I'll give you an example from my own life. My father used to say, "The rich get richer and the poor get poorer," constantly. It was his explanation for everything. What that taught me was that wealth was predetermined, that social mobility was impossible, that working hard was pointless because the system was rigged. It took me until my mid-30s and significant therapy to unlearn that programming. I eventually built a successful practice, but I fought my own internal beliefs every step of the way. My father's casual pessimism about money cost me a decade of potential growth. Contrast that with how I talk to my own children. When they asked why we didn't buy something, I never said we couldn't afford it. I said, "That's not where we're putting our money right now," or "We're saving for something more important to us." They learned that money was a tool we controlled, not a force that controlled us. All 3 of my children are financially independent, own homes, and have investment portfolios. The difference wasn't income. My father and I earned similar amounts. The difference was language. Here's another critical language pattern: how you talk about work. If you constantly complain about your job, say you hate Mondays, describe work as drudgery, you're teaching your grandchildren that earning money is miserable. They'll unconsciously resist career advancement because advancement means more of something they've learned is painful. Instead, talk about work as contribution. I'm going to work to help people solve problems. I'm going to work to create something valuable. Even if you don't love your job, frame it as purposeful contribution rather than necessary suffering. The same applies to talking about wealthy people. If you constantly criticize the wealthy, call them greedy or lucky, your grandchildren learn that wealth equals moral failure. They'll unconsciously self-sabotage any movement toward financial success because they don't want to become the thing you've taught them to despise. You can acknowledge wealth inequality and systemic issues without demonizing every person who has money. Teach nuance. Wealth itself is neutral. It's what you do with it that matters. This gives your grandchildren permission to pursue financial success while maintaining their values. Lesson 7 is about the multiplication mindset, and this comes straight from basic mathematics that most people never apply to money. Addition is linear. Multiplication is exponential. Most people add money. They work an hour, they get paid, they spend it, they work another hour. They're stuck in addition thinking. Teach your grandchildren multiplication thinking. How can $1 become 2 without additional work hours? Investment. How can one skill become multiple income streams? Leverage. This isn't get-rich-quick nonsense. It's fundamental economic reality. Every wealthy person understands multiplication. Every broke person is stuck in addition. Show them compound interest calculations. $1,000 invested at age 15 becomes over $20,000 by age 65 with no additional contributions. That's multiplication. Most adults don't understand this, which is exactly why they work until they die. Your grandchildren don't have to repeat that pattern. But here's the deeper principle. Multiplication thinking applies to everything, not just money. One good relationship can multiply into an entire network. One skill can multiply into multiple career options. One act of generosity can multiply into opportunities you never imagined. Teaching grandchildren to think multiplicatively changes their entire approach to life. In those transcripts I reviewed, one grandfather taught his grandson this exact principle using simple math. 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 times 2 equals 4. Seems the same, right? But 10 plus 10 equals 20. 10 times 10 equals 100. Same numbers, radically different results. That simple demonstration teaches more about wealth building than most college finance courses. Here's what that grandfather understood that most don't. The brain that learns to think multiplicatively about numbers will automatically apply that thinking to opportunities, relationships, and resources. It's not about the math itself, it's about the cognitive pattern. Addition thinking says, I have this, I need to protect it. Multiplication thinking says, I have this, how can I grow it? Those are fundamentally different approaches to life. Let me give you a practical way to teach this. Say your grandchild earns $10 from a commission. Addition thinking, I have $10, I can spend it on something that costs $10. Multiplication thinking, I have $10. If I invest this and it grows at 8% annually, in 10 years I'll have $21 without doing anything. Or I could use this $10 to buy supplies for a lemonade stand and turn it into $30 next weekend. Both are valid. The point is teaching them that money has multiple possible paths, not just the immediate spending path. One of my clients taught her grandson multiplication thinking through a garden. They planted tomato seeds together. Each seed cost a few cents. Each tomato plant produced dozens of tomatoes worth several dollars. Then they saved seeds from those tomatoes to plant next year. Free plants producing more food, producing more seeds. The boy understood multiplication through agriculture before he understood it through finance. The next year, he asked if he could sell excess tomatoes at the farmer's market. That's a 10-year-old who understands resource multiplication. The multiplication mindset also applies to time. Most people trade time for money linearly. 1 hour equals 1 payment. Teach your grandchildren to think about creating systems where their time multiplies. Write something once, sell it multiple times. Create a product once, sell it repeatedly. Build a skill that increases in value over time. These are multiplication patterns that separate people who build wealth from people who only earn wages. Let me bring this together. You have approximately 7 years to wire your grandchildren's brains for financial success. 7 years where they're developmentally primed to learn these patterns. After that, you're not teaching. You're attempting to override existing programming. Some people manage to rewire themselves in adulthood, but it requires tremendous effort and often professional help. These 7 lessons, commission-based earning, the 3-jar system, controlled failure, financial transparency, strategic delayed gratification, identity-based language, and multiplication thinking, they're not optional extras. They're fundamental neural programming that determines whether your grandchildren thrive or struggle financially for their entire lives. The parents who successfully implement these lessons don't do it perfectly. They do it consistently. They mess up. They correct. They stay committed to the long-term outcome rather than the short-term comfort. Because let me be clear, these lessons are uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable watching your grandchild regret a purchase. It's uncomfortable paying them small amounts for real work. It's uncomfortable having transparent money conversations. Comfortable parenting creates uncomfortable adults. Uncomfortable parenting creates comfortable adults. I've worked with families across 4 decades now. The ones who ignored these principles, their adult children are financially dependent, anxiety-ridden, and angry at a system they don't understand. The ones who implemented these principles, their adult children are independent, confident, and generous. The difference wasn't income level, education, or luck. It was intentional financial programming during developmental years. Your grandchildren are watching you right now. They're watching how you talk about money, how you spend it, how you prioritize it, how you share it. They're absorbing these patterns whether you intend to teach them or not. The only question is whether you're programming them intentionally or accidentally. Comment below with your location and tell me, which of these 7 lessons challenges you most? What's stopping you from implementing it? I read every comment and I'll respond with specific guidance for your situation. Here's what I want you to do this week. Pick one grandchild. Sit them down with 3 physical jars. Label them give, save, spend. Give them a simple task and pay them a small amount. Have them divide that money between the 3 jars. Watch what happens. You've just started rewiring their brain. That's it. You don't need to implement all 7 lessons today. You need to start with 1. Because every week you delay is a week those neural pathways are forming without your guidance. Every month is another month of unconscious programming that you'll have to help them undo later. The greatest gift you can give your grandchildren isn't money. It's the ability to create it, manage it, and multiply it. That's legacy. That's what they'll pass to their children. That's how you change your family tree. Start today, not tomorrow. Today, their brains are waiting. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.